You're standing in your kitchen, scrolling on your phone, half watching some nonsense, and the lights go out. 1 minute of darkness, 2, 5. Then the cell signal dies, sirens start, and the noise outside goes from traffic to panic. You stumble to that drawer full of cheap kitchen knives and tactical toys you bought because the packaging looked cool, and realize none of them are actually built to keep you alive. But let me ask you something. When the supply chain dies, the cops are overwhelmed and the ambulances stop showing up. What blade is actually in your hand? Not the one you wish you had, not the cosplay sword from the comic convention, but the one you bet your life on to process wood, build shelter, prep food, and fight your way out if you have to. I'm going to say this with absolute certainty. 99% of people watching this right now are holding the wrong knife. Here's the part the gear catalogs never tell you. In a real collapse, you don't have a knife collection, you have what's on you, and maybe one bag you can actually carry while running. Your blade is no longer a hobby item, it's a primary life support system like lungs and legs. Today, I'm going to show you how to design and craft the only knife you'll actually need after collapse, using materials you can get right now before the panic starts. Before we get tactical, you have a choice to make. You can be part of the 99% who giggle, scroll, and die confused when the lights don't come back on. Or you can join the tiny minority who actually prepare with intention. If you're planning to be in that 1% who survive the first month and the 0.1% who stabilize after that, hit subscribe, drop a comment with your current knife setup, and let's get to work. Forget Hollywood. After a grid-down event, your knife is not for spinning tricks or posing on Instagram. It's going to process fuel, cut rope, pry open jammed hardware, break down salvage, carve traps, clean game, and maybe, just maybe, keep someone from turning you into their canned protein. While everyone else is swinging useless stainless toys, you're going to be carrying a workhorse that looks boring in photos and legendary in reality. Let's start with the ugly truth. Most knives people own are single-purpose tools pretending to be universal. Kitchen knives are food only, fragile at the spine, and snap if you pry. Tiny folding EDC blades are great for opening Amazon boxes, not batoning through wet hardwood when you're cold, hungry, and out of options. Fantasy Rambo knives try to be machete, spear, and saw in one, and end up being bad at everything. So what does a real collapse knife have to do? Let me paint you a picture. It has to split kindling when your hatchet is lost, carve precise notches for traps, slice cleanly for medical improvised work, spark a ferro rod, pry open doors or crates, and still be controllable enough that you don't cut your own fingers off when you're exhausted. That's a ridiculous loadout for one tool, unless you design it intentionally from the start. Here's the science they don't talk about. Geometry beats marketing. Blade shape, thickness, grind, and heat treat matter more than brand name and color scheme. The physics is simple. The thicker and shorter the blade, the stronger it is as a lever, but the harder it is to slice. The thinner and longer, the better it cuts, but the easier it snaps. Your survival knife lives in the sweet spot between crowbar and scalpel. So here's the blueprint of the only knife you'll need after collapse. Blade length about 4 to 5 inches, no more. Overall length 9 to 10 inches. Thickness around 3/16 of an inch, maybe 4 to 5 millimeters. Full-tang, meaning the steel runs all the way through the handle. Drop point with a 90-degree spine for scraping and fire starting. Simple, boring, unstoppable. Why 4 to 5 inches and not some giant jungle machete? Because you're not a movie hero with infinite stamina and choreographed enemies. A mid-length blade gives you better control for carving, safer close contact work, and better concealment when you don't want to advertise that you're armed. While the amateurs flex their oversized steel anchors, you're moving fast, working precisely, and not drawing attention. Now let's talk grind, because this is where cutting performance either sings or sucks. I recommend a robust Scandi grind or a high saber grind, flat primary bevel with a strong shoulder toward the spine. That gives you enough meat behind the edge to survive batoning, but still bites into wood and rope efficiently. A full flat grind is slicey, but can be too fragile. A thick hollow grind is a nightmare when you slam it into knots. Steel choice is where internet arguments go to die, so let's be adults here. High-carbon simple steels like 1095, 1075, or repurposed spring steel are ideal in collapse conditions because you can sharpen them on improvised stones and they take a screaming edge. Stainless looks pretty, but when you chip it and can't fix it, that pretty doesn't keep you warm. Remember, you're building a tool you can maintain with a rock, not a lab. Here's the secret hack. You don't need to order fancy bar stock if you don't want to. Old leaf springs from trucks, coil springs, big hand files, and industrial saw blades can all be turned into a survival-grade knife if you treat them right. But there's a catch. Unknown scrap steel is a gamble. So when possible, grab known steels now while the internet still works and practice on scrap before collapse day. Before you touch steel, you need a design that actually fits your hand and tasks. Take cardboard or thin wood and trace out a 4.5-inch blade with a full-tang handle that fills your palm without hot spots. Add a subtle guard or finger indexing, but skip anything that locks your hand into one weird grip. Collapse knives are like good boots. They should disappear when you're using them, not fight you. Remember, your handle shape is more important than handle material. A slightly rounded palm-filling handle with no sharp edges will keep you working longer with fewer blisters. Think neutral egg shape, not angular robot spine. While they're obsessing over exotic wood and carbon fiber inserts, you're obsessing over not dropping your knife when your hands are numb and shaking. All right, we've got the concept. Now let's build this thing. There are two main paths, stock removal and forging. Stock removal is you taking a flat piece of steel and grinding or filing away everything that isn't your knife. Forging is you heating steel to critical temperature and hammering it into shape. Stock removal is easier for most people with basic tools. Forging is better if you're setting up a long-term off-grid metal shop. Let's assume you're starting with stock removal, because that's what 90% of you can do in a suburban garage without raising eyebrows. You take your cardboard template, trace it on steel with a marker, and then rough out the profile with an angle grinder or hacksaw. No fancy curves, no weird holes, just a practical drop point outline. Then you refine with files until the shape is clean. This part is slow, but that's good. It forces you to think about every line. Now the blade bevels. Here's where patience becomes a survival skill. You're going to file or grind both sides evenly, starting from near the edge and working up toward the spine, keeping the angle consistent. Go slow, dunk in water often to avoid overheating, and use layout lines so you don't drift. If your grind lines aren't Instagram pretty, who cares? The only beauty standard that matters is, does it cut and not break? Let's talk heat treat. The magic that turns mild steel disappointment into a real survival blade. The physics is simple. You heat steel to a critical temperature where the structure changes, then you lock that structure in by quenching, then you temper it so it's not glass hard and brittle. You don't need a fancy kiln. A simple propane forge or even a charcoal forge with forced air can reach the right temps. Critical temperature has a simple backyard test, the magnet test. As you heat the blade, keep tapping it with a magnet. Once the magnet stops sticking, you're in the zone. Hold it briefly to let heat soak, then quench in warm oil. Used vegetable oil works in a pinch. Edge first, straight down, no wobbling. If you did it right, a file will skate over the edge instead of biting. Congratulations, you just created a potential lifesaver. But we're not done, because right now that blade is too hard and brittle. Drop it, and it might chip, hit something weird, and it might crack. Tempering is where you tame the beast. Clean the blade, stick it in an oven at around 450 degrees Celsius, about 200-230 degrees C, for an hour or two, twice, and let it cool slowly between cycles. You're trading a tiny bit of edge retention for a massive jump in toughness, and that's exactly what you want for collapse use. Notice what we're doing here. Balancing hardness and toughness, just like you're going to balance aggression and caution when things go sideways. A knife that stays razor sharp but snaps under stress is a liability. A knife that bends a bit but keeps fighting is what you want in your hand when the world is kicking you in the teeth. Survival isn't about perfection. It's about refusing to fail. Once the heat treat is done and the blade is tempered, you refine the edge. Start with medium grit stones or files. Work your way to finer grits, always maintaining consistent angles. A working edge that shaves hair and bites into wood is plenty. You don't need mirror polish for collapse. In fact, obsessive mirror edges waste time you should be spending on food, fuel, and security. Now let's handle this beast, because a naked tang is just self-harm waiting to happen. You can use hardwood, G10, micarta, or DIY micarta made from old jeans and epoxy. Cut 2 scales, drill matching holes, and bolt or pin them to the tang with epoxy for extra security. Then you shape the handle slowly with rasp and sandpaper until it melts into your grip. If it looks perfect but creates hot spots in your hand, it's wrong. Fix the ergonomics first, beauty second. Hardwood pro tip: go dense and tight-grained, oak, maple, hickory, walnut. Avoid soft pine unless you're practicing. Seal it with oil or wax so it doesn't swell and crack. In a collapse, your handle will see sweat, rain, blood, mud, and probably a few tears, so give it every chance to survive. While everyone else is watching their plastic handles crack in the cold, your slab of hardened tree will still be there. Now let's talk about that spine. A real survival knife has a sharp 90-degree spine on at least part of the back, not fully rounded. Why? Because that spine is your ferro rod striker, your scraper for tinder, and your improvised tool for making fine shavings without dulling the edge. It also gives you better leverage when pressing with your thumb. Just don't sharpen it like a second edge. You want utility, not accidental self-surgery. So what can this knife actually do for you when the world goes dark? Let's run the scenario. You're in a cold, wet woodlot behind your subdivision, scavenging fallen branches to keep your improvised rocket stove going. You baton the blade through wrist-thick wood, carve feather sticks, scrape tinder, and then use the same edge to slice food. One tool, multiple rolls, zero drama. People always ask, what about chopping? Look, you're not clear-cutting a forest with a 5-inch knife. But with proper technique and a good baton, you can process surprisingly thick wood. For large-scale chopping, you complement this knife with a folding saw or hatchet, but if you lose those, this blade still keeps you in the game. While they're lugging 10 pounds of steel they barely use, you're carrying one knife that actually earns its weight. Defense question, because I know you're thinking it. No, you don't build a collapsed toolkit around fantasies of knife fighting in the ruins. But yes, if violence corners you, a compact, controllable blade is far more realistic than some anime sword. A strong grip, predictable balance, and secure sheath mean you can access it under stress without stabbing yourself first. This is defensive insurance, not a lifestyle. Speaking of sheaths, let's fix another common failure. That flimsy nylon pouch that came with your bargain knife? Trash. You need a rigid sheath, Kydex, thick leather, or even thermoformed plastic that covers the blade fully, retains the knife upside down, and mounts securely to your belt or rig. In collapse conditions, losing your primary knife because your sheath failed is like losing your lungs because your shirt ripped. Sheath carry angle matters more than most people realize. Vertical on the belt works, but a slight forward cant can speed up access without printing as much. Horizontal scout carry across the back is great for low profile but can be risky if you fall. Think about running, climbing, sitting, and sleeping with that knife on you. If it digs into you in comfort, it will betray you under stress. Let's talk about stealth, because collapse isn't a cosplay convention. You do not want bright mirror-polished blades glinting from across a parking lot. Go for a satin or stone-washed finish, maybe light acid etch if you know what you're doing. The goal is low reflection, easy maintenance, and a look that says tool more than trophy. The more boring your knife looks, the more dangerous you probably are. Here's something nobody talks about. Your knife is part of a system, not a solo superhero. Your system is knife plus fire, plus cordage, plus shelter, plan plus mindset. That means your knife should help you create cordage from plants, baton stakes for shelter, shave tinder, and even do delicate tasks like pulling splinters or trimming bandages. If any feature interferes with those core jobs, it's a liability, not a cool add-on. Operational security moment. Crafting this knife ahead of time puts you in a different category the night the grid fails. While your neighbors are raiding their own kitchens and arguing over a single dull bread knife, you quietly pull a proven tool from a sheath you've worn in, tested, and trusted. No bragging, no showing off, just silent advantage. And in collapse, silent advantage is everything. Now let's get even more technical. Balance point. Ideally, your knife balances just at or slightly in front of the handle scale front edge. That gives you a neutral feel for carving, but enough forward bias for light chopping and batoning. If the handle is too heavy, the blade feels dead. If the blade is too heavy, you lose fine control. Test this before you lock in the handle thickness and material. Edge profile matters too. For collapse, I like a slightly convexed working edge. Whether Scandi or Saber, you can micro-convex the final edge to improve strength. That distributes impact better when you hit knots or bone. Think of it as shock absorption for your steel. It might not slice paper on camera as dramatically, but it'll keep performing when your life depends on it. Maintenance is where most people fail. In a world without Amazon Prime, you're not ordering replacement blades or fancy ceramic sharpeners. You're using river stones, brick fragments, or broken ceramic to restore your edge. That's why high-carbon simple steels win here. They respond well to primitive sharpening methods. Practice now so that when your hands are shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion, muscle memory takes over. Let's hit a reality check. This knife is not going to make you invincible. You can still get overwhelmed, outnumbered, or just unlucky. A blade is a tool that improves your odds, not a cheat code. But every time you use it to build shelter faster, process fuel more efficiently, or avoid injury by having the right tool for the job, you're stacking the deck in your favor while others keep drawing dead. Think about the psychological edge, too. When you know you've personally built and tested your blade, something shifts. You're not just a consumer, you're a producer. You become the kind of person who can turn raw scrap into life support tools. That mindset bleeds into every other part of your prepping. While they panic buy junk, you're calmly manufacturing resilience. Let's walk through a full-day collapse scenario with this knife on your belt. Morning, you use it to split kindling, spark your fire, and carve a pot hook. Midday, you process wire and plastic from abandoned infrastructure to patch gear and build makeshift traps. Evening, you clean small game and prep food, then carve stakes to reinforce your shelter. At no point do you wish for a different blade. You just work. Now, what about redundancy? Am I saying literally own one knife and nothing else? No. I'm saying this is the one knife that must always work, even if everything else is gone or broken. You can supplement with a tiny neck knife, a multi-tool, or a camp machete, but this full-tang mid-sized blade is your baseline. If you can only grab one piece of steel when the door goes down, make sure it's this one. Let's address the elephant in the room. Cost. You can drop hundreds on a branded survival knife, and some of them are great. But you can also spend a fraction of that on steel, tools, and materials to build 2 or 3 blades and learn a skill set in the process. Money spent on capability beats money spent on logos every single time. Collapse doesn't care what brand is etched on your blade. Want a dark little secret? Most tactical knives on the market are designed to sell, not to survive. Aggressive angles, serrations everywhere, weird cutouts, coatings that look cool but flake under real wear. The marketing department dictates the shape, not the physics. You're breaking out of that manipulation cycle by going back to first principles: strength, control, maintainability. That's how adults prep. Let's talk failure points, because collapse is the land of failure. Full-tang means the handle won't snap off easily. Thick spine means prying without immediate catastrophe. Simple pins or bolts mean you can replace scales with wood, bone, or wrapped cord if they break. Every fancy little gadget you add is another way your knife can die at the worst possible moment. Strip it down to the essentials. You need to test this knife before it becomes your lifeline. That means controlled abuse. Baton through knots, twist gently in cuts, do tip pressure into wood, scrape ferro rods, cut cardboard, rope, and meat. Note what fails, what hurts, what slips. Better to find out now, in your backyard, than on a freezing night when you're wet, alone, and low on calories. Pain in testing is mercy in collapse. When you test, pay attention to your hands and wrists. If the knife forces awkward angles or makes your wrist bend weirdly, fatigue will stack up fast in a real emergency. That's where slight handle tweaks, more palm swell, softer edges, deeper finger indexing can transform your experience. Small adjustments now are the difference between controlled efficiency and dropping your knife at the worst time. Here's another pro move. Add a lanyard hole at the butt of the tang, but don't rely on lanyards to secure a bad grip. Use lanyards as insurance when working over water, cliffs, or rubble. A simple loop that tightens over your wrist can keep the knife from vanishing into a river or crevasse, but if your grip sucks, no cord will save you. Designed for primary control, not backup fixes. If you really want to push this knife into God-tier territory, consider adding subtle jimping, small notches, on the spine near the handle for thumb traction. Don't go crazy. Too aggressive, and it chews your skin under heavy use. Just enough to lock in when you're doing push cuts or striking fire. Again, function over aesthetics. If it works better and looks worse, you're doing it right. You might be wondering, What if I don't have a workshop? Good question. You improvise. Community makerspaces, friends' garages, local metal shops that will let you rent time, even simple setups with files and clamps on a balcony are options. The key is starting while it's still weird, not waiting until it's normal. Once collapse hits, nobody's renting you tool time for a smile. Let's hit the mental side one more time. Crafting this knife is rehearsal for collapse. You're practicing patience under frustration, problem solving with limited tools, improvising when something doesn't fit, and pushing through boredom when your hands hurt. Those are the exact same skills you'll need when the grid fails and every task takes longer, hurts more, and nobody is coming to help you. This is more than steel. It's rewiring your brain. So here's your choice, right now, while the lights are still on. You can keep buying disposable junk knives, chasing aesthetics and social approval, and hope the world never tests you. Or you can sit down, plan, and build a single, brutally capable piece of steel that you know intimately because you made it or customized it yourself. One path looks easy now and terrible later. The other is work now and leverage forever. Here's what I want you to do as soon as this video ends. Open a new tab and research simple high-carbon steels you can order locally, or identify salvage sources you can legally collect from. Sketch your ideal blade on paper, including dimensions. Then make a list of tools you already have versus what you need. Start small, but start. 99% of viewers won't. Be the 1% who actually acts. You can spend your nights doom scrolling, laughing at memes about collapse and pretending this is all just a fun thought experiment. Or you can quietly, methodically turn your anxiety into hardware, steel, gear, skills. The grid doesn't have to fail for this to pay off. You'll still have a custom tool, better mindset, and real confidence. Collapse just makes the ROI extreme. Your knife drawer is full of lies. This project is your first truth. Build a blade that doesn't care about trending hashtags, that doesn't need constant babying, that doesn't pretend to be 10 things and fail at 11. Build something that just works over and over when you're cold, hungry, and out of luck. That's what the only knife you need after collapse actually is. Now it's your move. You can close this, go back to comfortable denial, and trust that strangers in suits will keep the lights on forever. Or you can grab paper, steel, and time and start crafting the one tool that will never care who's in office, what the stock market is doing, or how empty the grocery shelves are. Subscribe if you're part of the 0.1% who act, drop a comment with your build plan, and then get off the screen and get to work. Class dismissed.